Hi everyone, this is I'm Genius from HUDs and today we're gonna talk about explanation of the HUD stats and how to use it correctly. On our first video, we already talked about the actual HUD while playing, but now we're gonna cover up each single stats of the actual HUD. This is a presentation. What is a HUD? Presentation of one HUD from HUDs member. Explanation of each single stats. Some easy way to make a decision based on HUD, pros and cons of HUD, playing with the HUD with comments. What is HUD? Well, the acronym HUD stands for Heads Up Display. HUD is working with a database mining utilized such as Holdem Manager 2 or Poker Tracker 4, just to name these two because they are the most common in today's game. These programs import any history file into the database and display the default stats of your table. So basically, for example, on PokerStars you can just save an history and your utilized software like Holdem Manager 2, let's say, just import those hand histories in the database you create, and then after you can display whatever stats you have for violin on your table. You can make your own custom HUD for particular need, mostly depending on the game type, table size, and the game speed. This is the HUD we're gonna talk about today. This is the Jonathan M HUD, which is a free release on our website, which is pretty interesting, I think. We're gonna cover up pre-flop violin stats, post-flop in position villain stats, post-flop out of position villain stats, hero general stats at the bottom as you can see, and pop-ups. This is the pre-flop villain stats. As you can see, name is hidden in blank. I don't want to show the villain name for many reasons, so normally you will just see the villain name you're playing right there. H stands for number of N we have on a certain player. WTSD stands for when to showdown. These stats may vary from player styles because if someone is really aggressive, this will be likely that this stats gonna be very low because you won't call all his bets and see a showdown when someone is really aggressive. And if someone is really passive, these stats may be higher, as I can see. AJ stands for post-flop aggression factor. In fact, this is the later formula may help you to figure this out. So aggression factor equal time villain's bet or raise on the flop on the time he just called post-flop. So this means whenever a villain is taking an aggressive action, either bet or raise, on whenever villain is taking a passive action when he just call. And we also have aggression factor from each treat on the flop, on the turn, and on the river. As you can see on the river, villain tends to be very aggressive there, so we need to note this. OG stands for open jam. As we can see, there are 3 open jam stats there. This is for the stack size. So 1 to 8 BB, villain's gonna jam 33% of the time on us. You really need to have big enough sample size to utilize those stats just because it's very a lot. So if you make assumption based on 10 n sample size, you may be wrong a lot of the time. Post-flop in position villain stats. As you can see, this is the actual part of the HUD that we're gonna talk about. In position pre-flop VPIP right there. This is the percentage of the time that villains puts money in pre-flop, either limp or raise. So as you can see, the 24 there plus 36 equal this VPIP. Limp stats, this is whenever a villain just flat call his small blind or just complete, as we say. So when he limps, this number is gonna rise. Raise stats, when the villain is raising, whenever is min raising or putting all his chips in pre-flop. This is the stats we want. Min raising, this is whenever villain is 2 is min raise, this is whenever villain is min raising pre-flop. Versus 3-bet fold, this stands for villain fold versus re-raise pre-flop in position. Flat call, this stands for when villain just call on the small blind when we re-raise him, so when we 3-bet the villain when he's flat calling us. As you can see, the number is pretty high. 4-bet, when villain re-raise us pre-flop, as known as 4-bet, when he face a 3-bet pre-flop. Whenever the 4-bet is all-in or just min 4-bet, this number will rise. Versus attack on limp, fold, this means when villain limped and fold to a raise in positions. Re-raise, this is whenever villain limped and 3-bet when face a raise, so this stands for whenever villain limped a small blind, we raise him and he decides to re-raise him, so he decides to 3-bet us. Call raise, when villain limped then flatter raise. Flop c-bet, this is in a raise spot, when villain continue his aggression by betting the flop, so villain is raising pre-flop, this is the first aggressive action he takes, and now he ceases betting the flop. This is the second aggressive action he's taking, so this is the c-bet there. Fold versus check raise, so this is whenever villains fold when he c-bet and we decide to raise his c-bet. This is the number actually, we don't have any time the villains fold there. Fold versus donked, whenever a villain is folding to or flop lead aggressive action in a raise pot. Flop c-bet limp pot, this is the same stats as c-bet but in a limp pot whenever a villain is just flat calling his small blind and we play the flop. Turn c-bet, this is whenever a villain is c-betting the flop and also c-betting the turn, so this is his third aggression move, because the pre-flop was the first, flop was the second one, and turn aggression was the third one, obviously. Fold to versus a check raise, this is whenever he c-bet the turn and we check raise him on the turn. This is not a number of time he's gonna fold, we don't have any hand on this one. Fold versus donk, this is whenever we lead out on the turn and villains decide to fold. No sample size on this one. Also on the river, whenever villain is c-betting also the river, so villain raising pre-flop, c-betting the flop, c-betting the turn, and now c-betting the river. 1 out 4, close to. Fold versus check raise, whenever villain is c-betting the river and he folds to a raise on the river. Pre-flop and post-flop out of position villain stats. This row is for pre-flop stats and those 3 are for post-flops. Out of position pre-flop VPIP, whenever the percent of the time that villains puts money in pre-flop, whenever he flat, limp or raise. Call, when a villain call or raise pre-flop out of positions. 3-bets, whenever a villain make a re-raise versus a single raise. In sequence we have a big blind, small blind raise, and then the big blind a re-raise or 3-bets. This is the actual 3-bet stats. Raise limp pre-flop, whenever a villain raise versus us limping or just complete the small blind. Raise limp stats. This is post-flop. Flop check call, whenever villains is check calling a bet on the flop in a raise spot. Check raise, whenever villain is check raising a c-bet on the flop. Fold c-bet, whenever villain is folding to a second aggression, as well as c-bet on the flop. Flop donk, whenever villain is leading into us on the flop, he's never leading there. Pretty good, interesting info to note. Donk fold, whenever villain is donking and folding to a raise on the raise spot. C-bet, 3-bet pot, whenever villain is 3-betting pre-flop and also c-betting on the flop. In this case is 100%, we should very be cautious with this one. he's taking a stab at any kind of flop when he 3-bets pre-flop. Whenever villain is check calling turn c-bet, so we raise pre-flop, we c-bet on the flop, and whenever we c-bet the turn, he's check calling there, check raise. Whenever villain is check raising on the turn versus a bet, fold c-bet. Whenever villain is calling a c-bet on the flop, then folding on the turn, this is number of time he folds. And probe is whenever is betting the turn when no aggression was made on the flop, so the flop goes check check, then he are out of position, he lead into us. This is the probe number. Hero stats, here we have big blind, effective stacks 28 BB. Those are simple stats we already talked about, so I'm gonna cover those on the bottom. Hero in position, small blind, PFR, this stands for pre-flop raise, so how many times we raise the small blind, how many times we limp on the small blind. Fold versus 3-bets, this is how many times we fold versus a re-raise pre-flop. Flop c-bet, how many times we c-bet pre-flop in a raise spot. Turn c-bet, how many times we raise pre-flop, c-bet the flop, and then c-betting the turn. C-bet in a limp pot, how many times we limped in the small blind, then we c-bet, then we bet on the flop in a limp pot. As I said, hero OOP call out of position, whenever we call out of position, a raise limped. Whenever we raise, villains limping on the small blind. 3-bet whenever we re-raise pre-flop. Fold versus c-bet whenever we fold versus villains c-betting into us. Long back flop whenever we leading in a raise spot on the flop. Check raise flop whenever we check raise on the raise spot on the flop. What we can observe if we pay attention to the stats on our HUD, some stats are easy to spot and we can use them to make better decisions with these stats. Obviously the first one is aggression factor on the river. Like I said, the number is pretty big there, so villain is very aggressive on this particular street. A lot of the time river bet whenever if you have any showdown value or not. I think his range betting the river can be a lot of bluff there, and some hand also for value, but smaller part of it. Adjustment we should make, we should call him a bit lighter when he decide to bet on the river, and also when the turn goes check check, we should call him a bit wider on the river. The second one is flat call 3-bet combined with the fold to c-bet stats. I think seeing those two, we should really 3-betting for value versus these villains, because he almost never fold through 3-bet, and also because he's not folding much on flop, so we should really raise our value, re-raise our value range, then c-bet a lot of the time, but not 100% of the flop, just when we have good value versus him or no showdown value versus him. If we have like a gut shot, let's say, or gut shot and overcard, I guess we should check behind and play on the turn versus these villains. Now OOP 3-bet out of positions, 3-bet, sorry, he's 3-betting us a lot of the time there. We should really widen up our 4-betting range and see how he responds to it. We can also limp more in that play well post flop, like 10-9 suited, 8-9 suited, Jack-9, and those type of hands, and see how it goes, because it don't raise or limp that much often, as we see there. So we should really try to make those two adjustments and see how he responds to it. In conclusions, HUD can give us more information that we cannot remember in either short or long-term memory. HUD can provide important information on the villains so we can explore him. We just covered this one. HUD is a great tool to have to make either post-game analysis or post a hand on the forum. Most of the time people would just ask for read and stats to give a better answer and how they will play according to what you just said, so the HUD is really important there. Cons: if you don't have enough sample size on the villain, you should not much deviate from your game plan. Let's say a villain is just 3-betting you 2-3 times in a row. You should not over adjust according to those 3 hands, because villain can just catch a hand sometimes, and you should not over adjust right now, I think. So don't do these mistakes. If you have a huge sample size from 6 months or more, you should really clear them up, just because most of the time villains play have changed and you can make some serious mistakes based on your HUD stats. So don't be confused with it. Don't fail in the trap to play ABC poker based on your HUD. I mean, this is happening every time I talk to someone about the HUD, and you don't need your HUD actually to play good poker. HUD is just giving you a little bit of strategy and advice to what is working and what is not, but you should really play your guts when you're playing poker, and don't fall in this trap. So let's move on to live playing, and I will show you those trees pop up I was talking about. Hope you like this short presentation, and see you for the live play. So here we are with the live play. Gonna talk about a bit of strategy also. So 9 off, easy raise there. When he dunked to us, I think he can dunk a 3, a 2, or either a flush draw, so I decided to go for a small raise, since I know he won't fold those. If you raise, then he fold. Deuces there, pretty standard 3-bet shove. 20 BB deep, so as you can see I just popped out Nash table right there. It's pretty interesting when you don't know what to do with your certain hand under, let's say, 15 big blind or so. I like it, very useful. Jack 10 there are really easy call preflop. On the turn I really want to see where I'm at, and also fold his King X type in and non-showdown value in, so that's why I'm leading the turn. On the river, I really think when he's calling on the turn 5, he can have either draw or made end, so I decide to fold and give up there. No reason to bet on the river. Standard open there, he folds. This is a ruffle table, just pull it right there. 8-6 suited, I decide to go with a small 3-bet there. He's opening 100% of the time, so want to see how he respond to the 3-bet. As you can see on the ruffle table, it's pretty down to 12 BB, you can use it correctly. Ace King suited there, really think we should c-bet there, even if we have showdown value. Gonna fold much of his floats. He calls, turns a king, which is pretty interesting. Now we obviously gonna bet the turn, since he can call the flop with a lower pair, 8s or gotcha type in, Jack 10, 9 10, and those. So we bet a bit small to get value, and he folds. Like I said, ruffle table, a really good thing. Under 12 BB, you got the raise call, the open jam, limped, raise fold, and open fold ranges. This is the last pop-up I want to show you. When you click on the villain name, you just see stack size, VPIP, PFR, and limps stats. Very useful when you really need more info other than open jam stats. Good tap to pop up. Just using the ruffle table for the rest of the match, I guess. Nine deuce, who decide to fold. Too trashy, I think. Get a walk with kings. Jack 8 off, standard open there. We really want to be aggressive in this spot. Ace queen off. Obviously, sometimes we can make a non-all-in 3-bet there, but this is really fine. I think we should really 3-bet jam this spot. I will be more inclined to 3-bet all-in someone who has been more aggressive than this pre-flop and shove over us a lot, so that's why I go for the jam. Ace deuce here, as you can see on the ruffle table, it's a shove under 12 BB. He snap call with deuce, which is good. Now we are low effective stacks, we pick up kings, which is really cool. Obviously we're gonna wait, not snap shove these just because we want to be sure he will call or so. He called with aces, obviously that's just a cooler. Hope you liked this video. It was I'm Genius from headsupsettinggo.com. Bye bye.